summarizes everything that I wanted to sort of introduce. And I'll take a seat now, but does anyone have any questions that we're developing as part of this explanation?
That's what's your question,
I
Keith?
have a lot of questions.
Just a clarification. We have a 2.4 mile piece,
Okay.
but we've carved out a section between Green Bay and Port Washington
Correct.
Road for a larger project.
Okay.
And that project, when it's developed, will have a bike path through it. I mean, it'll be, we haven't laid out the roadway yet, based on building footprints, but once that's done, the roadway will be wide enough that it'll have, that's a portion that's in the city of Glendale, will have a bike lane.
Okay.
And Port Washington Road will have bike lanes, so it'll be able to be connected. It'll be just it won't be a continuous piece. If the Beer Line Trail is extended to Capitol Drive, you'll have a bridge to cross. And then on the other side is the city of Milwaukee property, there's Capitol Place, and then there's a right of way along the exit from Capitol to Port. That could easily be accommodated to this extension, and then along Port you'll have bike lanes, and then Glendale North Olive Street would be redoing Port Washington Road in 2013. They'll be adding bike lanes at that point, so there'll be a lot of connectivity. I just want to, right now there's a lot of work going on, as you well are aware, between Port Washington and Green Bay. And I don't recommend anyone try to ride that portion of the traffic, especially with all the truck traffic we got going through there.
Right. You know, as we started, we saw this path, and the idea at first was, again, to sort of make art do work by virtue of taking the tires out and then just creating a stripe as long as we could, and then just keep building it and throw it over the Department of Corrections fence. We realized that was a little bit silly, but it got us thinking, this is a very great opportunity to realize something here. Let's take this a little bit more seriously. And so once we met Brian, we realized that there's actually the ability to facilitate in the near future, can never be too near, the realization at least to Capitol Drive. As I learned from Mike, that money is in place, not exactly available. But that sort of concentrated our focus, which is still quite an expansive area. It's 3,500 feet, so times 100 is...
That's from Keith?
That's from Keith to Capitol.
And is that right away that we have?
That's the area that we have enhancement funds to purchase.
Okay.
Brian still is the owner of it.
Right, okay.
That is the scope of the project that we have applied for grant funds and were awarded.
Okay.
And just to add a little bit maybe to that, and Mike or Brian clarify if I'm speaking, but we had the area to the south, right where Keith and Buffin meet, that section of the trail that goes down to Bremen and Burleigh, where Cafe Corazon is, for those of you familiar with River West. That developed out of property owners down there before my time, Mario Costantini, some of them, Alderman D'Amato at the time, working with the community, and they talked about purchasing that and kind of making this linear park, they were calling it. It's not so much of a bike path because you ran into intersections with streets that you kind of had to traverse around. In 2007, I think MEDC transferred that property over to the city of Milwaukee, and DPW approached Riverworks because one of our smaller business improvement districts runs through there. So for the past several years, we've been kind of working in a loose partnership with DPW, both kind of working together, doing our best to kind of maintain that area. We did a native landscape project that was recently completed, and we've been trying to maintain it. But we met Brian, or Daryl at Riverworks, we had met Brian, who owned the part to the north, and we had thought, what about extending it to the north? We had a meeting with, I think, Dave Schlabowski, Tom Landry maybe at the time, Mike, Brian, we talked about doing something, and it didn't work out. And then my understanding is that Mike came back the next year and said, hey, look, there's an opportunity to purchase this. That's a little bit of history, at least from my understanding of some of the background, at least of how Riverworks Business Improvement District has been involved.
So there's funds for the land, but there's no funds for any improvement.
For a trail.
There is funds for the trail then.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be doing the, whatever landscaping.
No major land, I mean,
Yeah.
just.
Lay a path.
Well, is the other thing a question of timing? Do you have to have DOT approval before you can actually assemble and make the purchase?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's federal funds, you have to follow a very detailed process. And I'm not sure where we are in the process, because I'm not the project manager anymore.
Right.
Do you have that?
I think so, yeah,
But Keith, are you looking for some kind of a lease arrangement to be able to move forward with things in advance of a purchase? Is that?
Well,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Could that
it's
be
not get-
discussed?
I mean, that's fine, and hopefully that can be worked out. But the project that the city has, and the project that we're gonna be using federal funds for, I'm not convinced we can use the product that is being presented. We are, because we got this federal funding under transportation enhancements, it has to be designed based on national standards. And basically, that's a 10-foot wide asphalt path that for all of us bike guys, that's what a bike trail is. That's what the Oak Leaf Trail is, that's what the Hank Aaron Trail is, that's what bike trails are. So, I'm not sure what the process would be in order to get approval of a different paving surface. I mean, and I wouldn't call it paving surface, different type of trails. So that would be
River West went through this before, didn't we? There was major discussions about the paving surface.
well, and we ended up paving an asphalt trail.
That's right.
Because we had federal money,
Yeah.
and that's what paid for it, and that's what the state had said we had to use.
And what's the width of this property that,
It's 100 feet.
100 feet?
So we have a lot, I mean, and right now, if you go out there, it's 100 feet of gravel. And if you stand out there, people always say, well, why doesn't the bike trail continue?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
So hypothetically, you follow those, national standards, and maybe it doesn't have the repurposed tire idea, it's a paved path, but what about all those other veins that you're talking about off it, and engaging in the other, like, farming programs or playgrounds and things like that? Is that the discretion of the city's free,
If-
choice then, to engage other
Once
space
we,
there?
yeah, and once we purchase the land and build our bike trail, then it's a city facility that, yes, these
So,
other
yeah,
things
as long
can,
as you
these other
follow,
things can
as long
happen.
as you follow like their standards, like the rest of the space, you
Well, if we're
can
not
kinda-
using the federal money for these
Remainder of the
other
state.
things.
Yeah, not
then-
to fund them, but like now
then-
you have
then we can do
allocated
anything we
space.
want, basically.
And that's what I was thinking, maybe this is more appropriate for some connectivity to, gardens along the trail. We have to follow the guidelines that we have to follow, but at the same time, there's a lot of other things and amenities that can pop up along the time, as time goes by,
Mhm.
that further enhance that corridor.
I'm sorry, I have a kind of a technical question. When you go to install the path, you're going to basically dig up the ground and, to do it. If this thing was already there, you're just picking it up and moving it. Would it be a problem if it was already there?
No,
Right.
and
So because you just
and I would
removed-
say, we got 100 feet, why would we put it there, right where we're gonna put the ultimate asphalt bike trail? Why wouldn't we put it,
Well, we don't know what that's the question. It seemed like we weren't sure what the time frame on the bike trail was.
it won't be built next year?
Right. So that's what that's
It's
why.
really difficult for you to be able to
Right.
estimate how long the state.
Well, it's difficult for me, because I'm no longer
It's not-
Right.
in
But-
the project, but.
Just, I guess, when originally it was anticipated that this trail would just be down the center, or would it somehow be,
You know,
offset to be able to
Yeah.
maximize other space?
I think there needs to be planning involved in that with people.
There really hasn't been that thought, and much thinking as I did into it is, that's what I would do. I'd just plop it down the middle and put a bike trail, and everybody that's on that River West Trail will be able to continue up to Capitol Drive and to Points North on Port Washington.
But it may make sense to, depending upon what the idea might be for the use of, other lands there, is to work with individuals along the path or that wanna further enhance the path for that corridor anyway, to see if some other alignment might work better for those future alignments.
Well, these guys are architecture students, and I mean, it's certainly not that difficult to draw up a plan that would include 10-foot path plus the requisite additional 3 feet of gravel shoulder, and
On either
put
side.
your thing wherever, and then make sure that wherever you did what gardens or
Right.
this path or whatever, there was always room for
that
that
path.
16-foot, section to cut through, because you need the 10-foot path plus 3 feet on each side for a shoulder. So, I mean, as long as that happened, I would think if it was a reasonable, and you sort of ran it past the city.
Yeah, I think we should run
you
it by
know,
you because
that they said,
obviously
yeah,
to manage
because,
too much.
yeah, there are
cost us
certain
too
issues
much.
with, and you could look these up as well, with you can't, and we ran into
Certain
this with
amounts
the
of
railroads,
coverage.
with how tight the turns can be and things like that, the turning radii you need to have meet standards. So if you wanted the eventual asphalt or crushed limestone path to wind through, you'd wanna make sure you didn't make real tight little turns that made it more difficult to do later.
There's also an existing path to the south that doesn't just go straight down.
Right.
That you could reference, I mean.
However, the
there's-
original design for that did, right? So-
I don't know, I don't think I was involved.
It did.
We need to look into it.
If I could just comment on this section you're asking about, Jeffrey, between
Then we did the
Keith
UC
and
on
Capitol,
south side.
that,
Path.
there's a couple property owners that
Yeah,
want to
that's what I was
purchase. They were on the east side of the railroad right of way, they want to purchase all the way across. And when I met with these gentlemen quite a few years ago, they said we can be patient, this is what we'd like to do. So I've held off on selling.
Okay.
I said if you wanted to buy a portion of it, they could only buy up to 75 feet, giving the city a 25-foot, instead of the 16 feet, something you can have.
Yeah, you'd want a little bit of.
So one of the neighbors was a Lat Lake, and unfortunately with funding, they had to pull back, but they were looking at putting dormitory, yes, along that. Yes, the path wouldn't be a straight path, it would hug the western side as it went around Lat Lake, and 1 or 2 properties to the south that were interested. So we've been holding off doing anything till we knew what the city was able to do. And then Mike also talked about the bridge, and the bridge portion of it would be a definite enhancement and asset to the roadworks area. And that portion, you don't have federal funds to buy a bridge, so the agreement would be is we would donate that and enough land on either side. Either the owner would be the city of Milwaukee or the owner would be Riverworks. And that would be the northern hub for this connectivity. And if it belongs to Riverworks or belonging to the city, then you would avoid that portion of infringement on the federal transportation enhancement grant. And I also have had, there's 2 billboards on Capitol Drive, north and south. I know that you'd like to have billboards disappear, but that's an income source that I had to negotiate with the railroad, with the railroad. Actually, it was with Canadian Pacific. I do have both those pads sold, and the person who's purchasing it understands what we're doing with the city, and the path would just maneuver around there, because one billboard's on the west side of the tracks, one billboard's on the east side. So if you go right down the center, you avoid both those new pads, and it then connects to the north side of Capitol Place. So we've been very patient in trying to keep this connectivity a viable option for the city. Then again, once it gets into Glendale, it disappears because everybody sold off those parcels. And then when it comes to my parcel between Port Washington and Green Bay, just north of Home Depot, that 26-acre parcel, I will, once we have a roadway in there connecting Port and Green Bay, it will be wide enough for a bike path.
Is that gonna be a public road? I mean, is Glendale,
It depends what
accepted as right of way?
depends on sort of what development goes in there. One of the projects we were looking at is Glendale is going to provide funding for that. We put a private driveway in and dedicate City of Glendale. Again, it depends on what sort of project ends up being. But we have enough width to put in a wide enough, so it's comfortable for vehicle and light traffic. We haven't identified the project yet, we're just remediating the site.
So, and then now back to the segment between Keith and Capital. I don't think there's anything that the city, any concern the city would have if you gave them permission to put this stuff, this product out there now in certain areas. Ultimately, if everything goes right, we're gonna, that would be part of the purchase then.
Can Ryan have public access to it on private property without liability interest? Does there need to be some kind of a lease between either Riverworks or the city in order to cover it?
Liability of,
No good deed, local deeds ever go on public. I'm
Public.
playing.
That's right.
I'm just thinking.
There's currently public access
Okay.
that's been created.
Okay.
I don't endorse it, I try to,
The other way, okay.
but we have a neighborhood that's completely separated from the western side, the Harambe neighborhood compared to what's on the east side. And the neighborhoods, you know, you wanna get from point A to point B, you find a path. The straightest path is the project tracks over the Capitol Drive Bridge to the north side of Capitol. So even though the fence has been put up, gates that are put in place, those are forced open, and if you went up there right now, you can see a definite path that's used. It's out there, and a couple of people were using it with their bikes and on foot. That's why if we gave at least that portion to the city right away, or to Riverworks, that would be in their control of public access for that portion, because that's where the primary access. There's another little street further south of Vienna, and it's one of those few streets that, with a little coordination, could be reconnected, so that people would be able to cross from the west side of Vienna to the east side, to where the businesses are, compared to having to try to go all the way around. And that's what could happen with this bike extension. There's only one property owner that would have to be, this would have to be coordinated with is US Corrugated, but it's a very small portion that would have to be accessed or just right away or easement to make that connection.
So is it your intent, that's your intent, is to try to get some ability to start with your, some improvement, I guess, before obviously our project is gonna lag behind for a while here, but.
We think this actually is more important for us, that different stakeholders are coming and we're not traditional architects in the sense that we have some vision that we want to input. We're not, what's his name, from the Fountainhead. We're not Howard Roark. We think that a better idea would come out of what, everybody in the community and, stakeholders, and city and owner, will actually give us a better idea than anything we come up with. And we truly believe that's it.
May I have your attention, please? A fire alarm has been reported in the building. Please stand by for further instructions while this is being investigated. May I have your attention?
Well, until we get further instruction, I will comment to what he's talking about as far as community members. So what I've been doing, which was originally a partnership with Jan at the North Avenue Garden site, and now I'm working more so with my Daphne groundwork, is I've worked this summer with 8 youth. Each one had one plot. They gardened there and identified community members who want to purchase the produce from these youth. And just about all the customers, 8 customers, 6 to 7 of them lived within 5 blocks of the garden. So I said, well, we have no need to drive there, so we're delivering by bike. So that's where this project, Keith actually happens to live across the street from me. So just in neighborly conversation, he mentioned what he's working on, and my mind just went straight to the fact that, well, that's great. We'll have no cars around. And whereas for a lot of people, this being a bike path only could be an issue, that's actually desirable for us. Now you say, well, that's a lot of area, and I'm only working with 8 youth, but this is a program designed to grow exponentially where the youth are actually helping me instruct. So next year we're looking to take on anywhere from 30 to 45 customers, and we had one article that was written up in the Journal Sentinel about what we're doing, and it kind of got a lot of awareness. So Outpost contacted us and said, well, we're interested in buying from you. I said, well, we've got 8 youth and 8 garden boxes, so what kind of produce are you guys looking for? And I did ask if they had any grants that they're looking to send our way in the meantime. So conveniently, however, one of Outpost's main locations happens to be very, very close towards the Capitol Bridge. So the opportunity, obviously with the economy the way it is, the opportunity for vast amounts of produce to be grown in very close proximity to a buyer who really wants to buy from not just me, but youth community members who are engaged in a kind of very integrated educational process and taking money back to their families and their community is very promising. So obviously we're growing rapidly, but there's still a lot of room for us to grow. So from my perspective, I was assuming that the path wouldn't be installed next year, but there is a desire to, when possible, move what we're doing to the side along this garden path. So we're very excited about that, and the youth are as well. So I'll just put that out there as far as one exciting feature of this path.
Does the School of Architecture, do you guys have the ability to do background plans, to go out and do a survey? A more detailed survey than just right-of-way lines and stuff. Actually go out there with like total stations or
we do have transits and theater lights, but there are very few people who know how to use them. Could use it as an educational thing, but my schedule this semester is kind of full.
I guess at the very least you could use the most current ortho photos and just draw something. It wouldn't have.
It would be easy enough to do that.
You could just to scope out a basic plan of where gardens
May I
might
have
be,
your attention, please?
where the
We
trail
are
might go,
continuing
that sort of
to
thing.
investigate the alarm. Please stand by.
I think you could, if you had that to start with, I mean, that would just help when you go into rooms like this with neighbors or whomever and say, and just start putting things on paper, ideas on paper, you know.
Yeah, we did have a plan, but I can certainly share that with anyone who's interested. Maybe an email. This is like the new days where we don't roll out this big drawing. But I can share with you like some of our preliminary thoughts. Out of the 350,000, we had designated 110, which is 2.5 acres for gardening, and then did Jeremy took off. Ian, sorry. 110,000 also for some level of activism or art, whether that takes place in the form of like a bicycle movie or it's just a designated area for sculpture. They have this in Chicago. Art's a liberal term, but if it was more useful for planning, then take over that space. There's obviously a lot. We still have the intention of at some point maybe creating a bicycle polo court, which would take 33,000 square feet. We were going to leave 27,000 for a media garden, a pair of bathrooms. The media garden would be like a sort of tiered seating thing. What's really nice, I hope you'll agree, from a design point of view, is that turning the tire on its end at once solves a lot of problems. It becomes permeable, it becomes structural, but it also becomes this, it can morph. So it can begin to take a step up through each thing, then it can begin to retain soil. And we've developed another prototype which would sort of use this same undulating technique but in a larger fashion to create what kind of looks like corrugated cardboard rounded off as a small amphitheater. So we thought, you know, having something that's still yet a landmark that sort of rises from this concept of just trying to connect these neighborhoods through this same recycled material might be really fascinating. The plumbing and everything is a dream, but if you could have one central source for some outlet to power for the media garden, this could be projected from the top of those tiered seats and provide just a small outhouse. Throw a couple other ideas out there in case anyone else wants to chime in or has ideas of their own for what this could be. I've also designated 10,000 square feet for a playground, 36,000 for kind of a transect. What we're thinking and looking at the planning is to see if we can get an easement either from US Corrugated on the south side. You're talking about on the north by Capitol, right?
No, to the south.
Oh, you're talking.
That's where it aligns with Vienna.
Okay, okay.
Vienna terminates basically at one of their parking lots.
Right where the parking lot is at First and Vienna.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the same easement that I would be speaking of.
And then the city of Milwaukee has Vienna. Part of it is
Almost
not
seems like
paved.
it,
It's not paved, like it's just sort of just filters down. It used to be next to the Johnson Brothers bottling.
Yeah, and there's still a rail there, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we're the same spot then. But that I think is pretty close to the middle, and I think is elemental to you know, not being in a place that's either fenced or walled in by several stories for 2/3 of a mile. And also just sort of invites the community. I mean, right now it's like, you know, you just have these huge 5-story industrial buildings that sort of contain the neighborhood, and you're forced to, I don't know, shuffle down what's the equivalent of almost a highway berm if you don't want to trespass on Brian's land, which is obviously a concern, being that a lot of shopping takes place just on the other side of that bridge. So I think, you know, Riverworks would probably agree that that would be great for the community to have that translate.
Keith, speaking of ideas, did I share the drawings from Philip Katz?
No, I've tried reaching Philip several times myself.
Okay. Michael, you have those?
I've seen them.
Okay. Does Jeffrey have the information? Philip Katz was working with the Lad Lake because this was going to be in conjunction with Lad Lake.
Path between Capitol or Capitol
Capitol Place.
and the level where the school is. It's a combination scheme.
Instead of having people traverse down. Yes, but they also had, Philip also looked at the Capitol Drive Bridge. It was the concept of what they did in New York with the High Line, where they would turn it into elevated park with landscaping. So you get a bike path down the middle, you have elements of trees and things like that, and then a place to sit when you're up over the Capitol Drive. So that'd be the connection point. But there were some, you're asking about some drawings, there were some architectural ideas in private-public type of arrangement around the Lad Lake project.
You know, I guess related to that, with the expenses of that lake, no longer looking into that. We had looked at potentially making some sort of connectivity from Elmina on both sides, more pedestrian related, not vehicular, because right now, as Mike said, people from Capitol Place, North 3rd, whatever, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way to the port, they'll walk over Capitol Place, which is up here, and rather than having to walk all the way around that rail corridor and come back, which is quite some distance, they'll cut down that hill right before the bridge, just west of the bridge. So you go over there, you can see the pathways, which in some cases could be a public safety concern, whatever. So we had talked about if there was something, if this negotiation between Bryan and the city were to happen, making some sort of connectivity, maybe just on Melvina and on North Street there, then people maybe wouldn't go down the hill, they'd cut right through. You can get out by Lad Lake and get right to Capitol Drive to and there's gonna be bike lanes being put in on